just wanted to thank everybody for coming today as we do another New Songs for Butte Mining Camp presentation. This project was started by Carrie Coe when she was here at the archives and digging through materials, and she found this songbook called New Songs for Butte Mining Camp. And it's filled with songs. They're mining labor songs. They're Butte specific. This would have folded up and just fit in your back pocket, and you could whipped it out and joined in to some group singing at different kinds of meetings and gatherings here in Butte. I'm going to pass this around so everybody could take a look at it. But yeah, they've got some classics like Solidarity Forever, but then there's one called Cornelius Kelly, which actually one of our artists recorded. These are all specific to Butte. And as far as we've been able to find out, no one had ever recorded any of these songs, and there really is only one copy of this book here in the archives. So Carrie envisioned this project where we invite musicians from all over Montana to take a look at this songbook, also take a look at other mining labor songs about Butte that the archives has on hand, and really research them and think about what they would like to do in their own style. So they stay here for a week, do that research, go home, rework one of these songs, and then we invite them to come back to Butte, and we do a great talk here at the archives about each artist's unique experience engaging with this material, and then they record the music. And so right now you can hear all of this music on our website, clarkchateau.org, that we've completed so far. This is a series of 15 musicians. We're about halfway through the project. Next year we'll have 6 more. And yeah, it's been a really great project. And later tonight we'll have a performance. So today we have a gentleman joining us all the way from California. Our original grant is 14 musicians, but this is our number 15 that we've added on. Nicholas Merz has joined us all the way from Los Angeles. He heard about our project and got really excited and wanted to join in. So Nicholas is on tour today, so he'll be playing with us here tonight in the Clark Chateau Ballroom at 7. And then moving on to Missoula and Bozeman this weekend if you missed that show and you happen to be over that way this weekend. So I'm going to let Nicholas talk about himself, so I think you'll do better at it than I will. But thank you all so much for coming and being interested in this project. So here, I'm going to pass it around.
Thanks, Christine. My name's Nicholas. Christine, and correct me if I'm wrong, but am I one of the only folks that's done this project that's outside of Montana?
Yes.
Okay, so the pressure's on. So I'm kind of approaching this project in an odd sort of way, and I hope to kind of give you all an overview. And I hope I don't stumble over my words too much with this, but essentially, like, I'm an outsider with this, and I really need help on a local level. I'm not an expert with any of this stuff. This is sort of me giving like a groundwork for what I'm about to talk about, but I want to basically just talk about the things that led me to this point in coming to Butte, and like sort of the events that inspired this thing. I sort of consider being an outsider fairly important, and I just want to show you that how these things affected me kind of on a deeper level with the work, and then also with my own art and my participation with the project that I'm involved in. So I guess just as an overview, and I'll talk more about this in a moment, but I'm doing a project with a gentleman named Michael Workman. He's shooting a documentary. It's sort of in the early stages at this point, but it's a documentary on Butte. And Michael's actually a resident, or well, former resident, but he grew up in Missoula. his sister lives here in Butte, and I kind of came into contact with Michael in an interesting way, but I just sort of want to give you a background on where I'm coming from. I'm a Washington native. I'm currently living in Los Angeles. I grew up in a small town called Duval, that's part of the Snoqualmie Valley, east of Seattle. If you all are familiar with the show Twin Peaks, that's where that was filmed. There's a town about 4,000 people when I was growing up there. My parents are both, my mother taught at the elementary school that I went to. My father was a tile setter. He was involved in the unions in Southern California. My parents met in Southern California. They moved us up to Washington. Union history is a pretty important piece of my family history, and it's even just sort of echoing more recently. My father, about a year and a half ago, became homeless through a series of sort of unfortunate events. He sort of, like I mentioned before, he's a tile setter. He was an independent contractor after leaving the unions in Southern California. He sort of didn't really understand his trajectory as being a father and also an independent contractor within that trade, and sort of only understood how to make money and sort of work 6 to 7 days a week to support a family. And he sort of worked himself into an injury, stopped being able to get bids from contractors to work. It's really a young person's job doing that sort of labor. And unfortunately, because he was independent and didn't have the backing of a union or support in that capacity, he was sort of left to fend for himself. The sort of silver lining of this story and his homelessness that kind of came out of this is that about 6 or 8 months ago, his pensions cleared from his union and for his former union work, and he was actually able to use that money to get himself into a trailer, and that enabled him to kind of like end his homelessness, which was a huge, huge weight off of my family's shoulders. This has just sort of been an ongoing thing within my family, conversations around unions when I was younger, understanding the importance of community. And so personally, I'm a musician. My father and mother were both musicians. I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I'm also a luthier. I repair and restore instruments. I brought my guitar today. This is an example of something that I've done, but I sort of specialize in the idea of restoring older acoustics, doing like full rebuilds on them. So this is a Stella parlor guitar from the 60s. I took this apart, rebraced it completely, gave it a neck reset, a refret. There's a lot of things that went into this, but sort of my family's trajectory with labor and working with your hands is like sort of passed on to my brothers and I. It's an important piece of both my art and what I'm doing with this work. And so in terms of growing up in a rural place and kind of being introduced to the history within Butte, from my understanding both back home and what I've understood in Butte in the very kind of like tip of the iceberg kind of way in terms of my research, history seems to be pretty suppressed in rural places. And as an outsider with this project, I really want to be able to understand that on a deeper level. And it also seems to me that history rises up to the present as well. So I mentioned Michael Workman earlier. I met Michael oddly through the internet. And basically I was playing a show in Missoula. He reached out to me because he found my music he was sort of taken with some lyrics of mine, and he kind of started to talk to me more about sort of relating to these lyrics, the ideas of like socialist working class themes, talking about struggle and equality. And when Michael and I met in Missoula, a friendship quickly formed. We were able to start collaborating pretty quickly on a few things. And more recently, he put together a short film about his father and his own struggles within basically his sort of situation as a lower income household, how he's not able to get a lot of the prescription meds that he needs, how it's affected his relationship with being able to work and function within society, and then his relationship with his kids as well. Michael sort of prompted this idea of this film to me and asked me if I'd be interested in scoring this, which is sort of has become like the nature of our relationship in a working relationship. And the themes, in meantime, really resonated with me in terms of the parental relationship. And basically, this was kind of an unusual project for me because he sort of asked me to compose some ideas based around these very loose themes, and then he had a bunch of footage that he wanted to put together with this project. And so essentially, the project sort of started with him prompting me, which is sort of unusual in terms of composer-filmmaker relation. It's typically a normal sort of project would be, hey, I'm going to give you maybe a rough edit of this film, and I want you to watch this, and I want you to kind of engage with this in your way, and sort of here are the themes that we're working with. The composer is typically removed completely from the community or the situation, and then sort of asked to respond to this thing. So Michael basically asked to flip this in a way where he was sort of developing these ideas and prompted me with these things, and then sort of created the movie around this. This is important because in a lot of ways, this Butte documentary that he's working on, he's personally asked me to come to Butte, engage with the community here, explore the public archives. He introduced me to Christine and Carrie. The scope of this film is interesting because we started off with the Montana Folklife Survey tunes that Kevin Shannon is a part of, and that it's focused on the traditional Irish songs that kind of came over that infiltrated like the mining camp and whatnot. And he sort of was vague with me about a few things, but he was really, really pushing this idea that he wanted me to come over here and engage before any of this, I guess, the pre-production or any of the work was going to be happening. So my wife and I came to Butte in the summertime, this last summer. Coincidentally, on the way we were listening to the David Harvey lectures on Capitol. And so on the way up, she was a little confused on the nature of the project, and also with the way that as a musician I've toured in the past, it's very community oriented. I'm engaging in a lot of do-it-yourself sort of community situations, and meeting people maybe from different parts of the country and communicating with them on the phone, showing up, and it's almost like an instantaneous bond between myself and these people. It's sort of like a deeper friendship or familial respect. And Sarah, my wife, was sort of, this was all kind of new to her, and on arriving, she was sort of like, we're coming up here for this project and you don't know any of these people, and you're gonna engage with these people, and how are they gonna even trust you to do this thing or like speak to this sort of thing? And she was asking me all these questions, and frankly making me pretty nervous about it, because it was sort of like, well, I know Michael, and I know, you know, I communicated with Christine and Carrie about the archives. I communicated, and I had been doing research about Kevin Shannon, Frank Little, and just sort of the copper mining history within the town. And so coming up here with her kind of like prodding me and being like, are you sure that this is a good idea? Do you think, you know, we immediately arrived, and we were sort of embraced like instantaneously by Christine and Carrie, Daniel, our friend Clark, Christy, who runs the artisan residency program up the hill. And this is, I just want to kind of illustrate that this all happened over a day and a half. So like, there was a lot of information taken in, and we were sort of whisked into this community, which is, and now I know I'm being filmed, and I don't want to talk illy about like places like Los Angeles, but it was a really an emotional moment for me as somebody who's a musician and somebody that's involved in the labor industry to meet a community of people and feel immediately included and feel like, hey, we want to talk to you about our town. If you're involved in this project, we want to make sure that you understand this thoroughly. And so for me, that was kind of a whirlwind, and I'm not quite used to that, especially in Los Angeles, where if you meet somebody, and I mean, this is like a blanket generalization, right? But if we're talking on a personal level, and I'm sort of saying, oh, hi, I'm Nicholas, nice to meet you, immediately it's sort of like, okay, who are you, and are you important in any capacity? And, oh, you're not? Okay, I'm so, I mean, it just felt like very human to me, being here, just almost immediately. There was this moment, too, where Clark, who works in the archives, and helped found the radio station down here, we were sitting down, and he and our other friend Daniel Hogan, they were bringing us around, and I happened to have my guitar with me, and he asked me, we were sitting down, he was like, why don't you sing me a song? And I was like, what? Like, you know, I mean, it's a funny thing to mention, just in that, as a musician or as somebody that's within the arts, you often have conversations around these things, and I don't know if all of you are musicians or if you're artists in any capacity, but for somebody to take interest in that, and for somebody to actually be like, hey, okay, so I spend most of my time, like waking hours, working on or thinking about these ideas, right? And for somebody to take the time and be like, hey, I want to get to know you on that level, that's a significant thing. So coming to Butte, understanding that kind of human connection with people that are very embedded in the community, that have a strong role in terms of what this city is going to look like tomorrow, it's a big deal. And understanding that as an outsider and as somebody that is trying to be a part of this community in my own capacity. So within that day and a half, we went to the Berkeley Pit, we went to the radio station, we went over to Christie's residency, we visited Frank Little's grave, we went to the Carpenters Union Hall, which Clark and Daniel have both amassed grants for to revitalize that Union Hall. Christine and Carrie allowed Sarah and I to stay at the Jacobs house. We looked through the library. We were kind of startled by just the amount of historic significance, even just within that place, and how these things are preserved. This is obviously, like, if any of you, I don't know everybody's backgrounds, and and we're going to go around the room and we're going to go one at a time and figure out where everybody's from and what's growing up on the West Coast, touring throughout the country, the preservation of history is not very present, especially on the West Coast. There are like moments within like major metropolitan areas, Los Angeles, New York, different places that preserve history, but this was sort of a startling realization coming here and experiencing this. We also went to the Clark Chateau, where Christine and Carrie showed us around, kind of sort of pulled a lot of pieces together in terms of the history. And then also, talking to residents, kind of seeing the town as a whole. We were also made aware of the prison release program and folks working for below minimum wage. And as an outsider coming in and seeing workers being exploited under the prison industrial complex, it's something that as an outsider, I want to be able to understand more. And I see that, and it's sort of reminiscent. I mean, in terms of my knowledge of Butte, I know this much compared to all of you. But seeing that, it sort of echoes in the metaphor of workers working under these extreme conditions within Butte's history. So we also explored the public archives. And in our time here, seeing many examples of the US government trying to suppress and erase anarcho and socialist uprisings, reading more about the Wobblies and how they organized in Spokane, Bisbee, Fresno, Missoula, Butte, and they were organizing for free speech. And trying to protect workers' rights. I started to understand more about Frank Little's trajectory in Butte, and correct me if I'm wrong, but he was here for 2 weeks, is that correct, before he was killed? And then even understanding that, and then understanding that his funeral was more widely attended than Evel Knievel's funeral. So is that no, okay. See, I appreciate this. I need
It could have been pretty
feedback.
close. It was the largest of its day.
Yeah.
Frank Little?
Yeah, Frank Little was the biggest.
It was.
Yeah.
And then, what's his name? The 1917 speculator mine disaster. There was a big funeral along with
Well,
that.
yeah, but that was a lot of people.
That was, yeah. I mean, but as far as like
Yeah.
gathering, I think that was maybe the biggest, followed by Frank Little.
That's just understanding that again as an outsider and seeing the importance of that is really interesting. It's fascinating to me. Also reading within the archives about how the IWW is a radical anti-capitalist union that wanted to organize as one union to kind of overthrow what's happened or what was happening and is happening within capitalist America. And it seemed from my readings, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed as though it was one of the first labor unions that was anti-racist and feminist. And from what I understood about it, that all workers, with the exception of bosses and police officers, were included in this. Am I tripping up on anything thus far? Does all this seem okay? It's an interesting thing, understanding how the scope of this idea with the Wobblies and what these intentions were, and the idea of like the uniting force within America, and then understanding how within, like the example that I illustrated with my own father being involved in this trade or labor union, and how it could only do so much for certain people, but the idea that the Wobblies wanted to kind of create a more unified front on that's a pretty strong image. We also read a lot about Joe Hill and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. and this, again, like, this is all happening within a day and a half, so it was sort of like a whirlwind. When, I believe it was Carrie that told me this, but, so Sarah and I live in this area in Los Angeles called West Adams, that the Clark Center is actually about 7 blocks from our house, and when we came back, we were like, oh my God, what the hell? Like, how is this sort of like following us in a way?
Is that the place that he built in honor of his mother?
Yes.
Yeah, so William Clark built a house in honor of his mother in Los Angeles. It began as a home for working women because William Clark's mother was a teacher and a secretary. So you could live in this giant, mansion that had little apartments and a dining hall. I think there was tennis courts, and a pool, and yeah, single working women were the only ones who were allowed to live there, and it was reasonably priced for them. And yeah, William Clark built that in honor of his mother in Los Angeles. So
That's an
What was that?
interesting thing that I never
Yeah.
knew.
Yeah. Wait, Clark Sr. or Clark Jr.?
Clark Sr. built
Okay.
that, and then Clark Jr. built the Hollywood Bowl and founded the LA Philharmonic Orchestra. And William Clark Jr. also built a rare book library as well in Los Angeles that UCLA now takes care of.
Which is, the book library is on the grounds that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The books are all actually stationed within like a copper sort of manifold that holds the books that which is from the mine. Do you have a
Yeah,
question?
I just wanted to ask if that included single working women with children as well.
I don't know.
Oh God.
I hope me just talking to, this is just an aside, but I hope me just talking without any sort of presentation bits is okay, because I get really distracted. It's hard for me to do multiple things at once, and it's easier to just talk. So I appreciate you listening to my rambles, but so yeah, experiencing this, coming back home, being able to tour the Clark back at home was really interesting, and it sort of struck me, again, as an outsider, seeing where America is right now and understanding how just sort of my very brief and sort of condensed understanding of this, it sort of reminds me as like a micro of the macro, and it feels sort of, for folks my age and the community of people that I met, it sort of feels like the frontier in a lot of ways, because when I met Clark and Daniel, Christine and Carrie, Christy, these folks that are sort of embedded within the community that are trying to preserve the history and trying to sort of create an awareness and to understand how we move forward from understanding the past. That to me sort of feels like a very like ideological approach that I agree with, and that I would say, yeah, this makes total sense. But it's sort of, in certain ways, it feels kind of like a radical idea compared to what's happening later at capitalism right now. And so, as an artist, this makes a pretty big impact on me, and especially with my contribution to this documentary that we're working on right now. My sort of, the next bit in terms of my involvement with this is that I'm going to be visiting Butte more and exploring more of the archives, understanding this, and I'm working with Clark right now, recording some songs for this, actually this weekend. I've never personally done anything like this in terms of going to a different community, working with folks that are a part of this, and a part of the natural history that comes with this place. And it's, again, I'm gonna bring it back to what my wife Sarah was saying to me earlier. It's nerve-wracking in certain ways, but it's also very enlightening, and it's been a really incredible experience meeting everybody and sort of involving myself with folks. So if you see me kind of stepping over my shoelaces, walking around Butte at all, and if you have any suggestions for things or trying to point me in the right direction, I would really appreciate it. I'd like to talk a little bit about sort of the performance tonight. And I would also like to talk about the song that I chose. And I want to sing it to you, but I also want to recite the lyrics to you, if that would be okay, just because I think that it's quite a funny song, but it's also an angry song too. So this is a song from the Kevin Shannon collection that was given to me from Michael. And the song's called Musha Tutu. And from my sort of interpretation of this song, I feel like Musha Tutu essentially means bullshit, like a bullshit situation. And my wife Sarah and I, after I sort of approached this, we just started, like, the phrase Musha Tutu just appeared in our vocabulary. So anytime there was a bullshit situation, we were just like, Musha Tutu, like, what is going on with this? So the lyrics are, I was a simple rovin' when I started out to roam, headed for Montana, and I left my happy home. And when I crossed the Rio Grande, I thought I'd done my best. I never counted on the bullshit that they peddled in the West. A Musha Tutu. Final deed'll do, Musha Tutu, the other will you tutu I settled in a little town the natives they call Butte. I looked about the diggins for a job I thought would suit. I finally got located and I liked it mighty fine. I made a bunch of money so I thought I'd buy a mine, a Musha Tutu. Final deed'll do, Musha Tutu, the other will you tutu I. Now a bullshit foreman boss of this old mine told me 10,000 bucks would make this thing look fine. I dished him out the money, and I thought I had a snap, when nothing but bullshit just dropped down in my lap, a Musha Tutu. Final deed'll do, Musha Tutu, the other will you tutu I got bullshit from the river, I got bullshit from the hills. I got so much damn bullshit I couldn't pay my bills. They gave it to me red hot and they gave it to me cold. And I got more bullshit than I got Montana gold, a Musha Tutu. Final deed'll do, Musha Tutu, the other will you tutu I. So that's the tune. I loved this song when I heard it. It's brilliant. I really appreciate Michael showing me these Kevin Shannon interviews. I really appreciate him including me on this project. And he basically prompted this idea to me and said, hey, I want you to interpret this. This is an a cappella song, so there's no music to the song, but I want you to interpret this how you would interpret maybe one of your own songs. So I wrote the music for it and sort of rephrased some things just in terms of like how things fit, but just kept all the lyrics the same. And yeah, it's been a really fun project. And I've learned a few other Kevin Shannon songs that Clark and I are going to record over this weekend and subsequently come back and do more work on this project around those ideas. I'm going to try and keep this part brief because I get, as I said before, I get nervous talking about my own art or my own approach to these certain things, and it's easier for me to kind of say, hey, let me explain this scenario that I experienced rather than I'm going to bore you with my own stuff. But I do want you to understand where I'm coming from. My mother and father, as I mentioned before, were musicians. They both played in country bands in Southern California. My father is a pedal steel player, and my mother sang. I was sort of involved in music early on. I played in sort of loud, rambunctious bands when I was younger, and toured a lot all over the United States, and still am participating in that. At one point in my late 20s, I transitioned into more of a solo career. That was a bit challenging for me, just in terms of sort of the archetypes and cliches that come along with these things, especially as a white man. I think it's important as an artist to challenge these ideas. And I also sort of believe, and thanks to my upbringing, my own parents encouraging me to do these things, they always sort of told me to speak your own truth, because that's really the only thing that we each have in a lot of ways. So I came to, does everybody know what the pedal steel is by any chance?
Mm-hmm.
So the pedal steel, so I'm going to be playing the pedal steel tonight at the performance. The pedal steel, you've all heard this if you've heard country music. It's a really weepy, sort of beautiful slide guitar. The difference between a slide guitar, which sits typically on somebody's lap, you've heard this idea, or you've heard this term lap steel before maybe. There's a whole mechanical undercarriage that sits underneath the pedal steel, that are controlled by knee levers and foot pedals. So on my right foot, there's a volume pedal. My left foot controls these foot pedals, and my knees, on either side of each knee, there are knee levers. And there's 10 strings. I know, you're gonna watch me stumble all over myself. On either side, all of those things function to sort of bend and slacken and tighten the strings. It's a chordal instrument. You can play chords on it. It's percussive. It's a lead instrument as well. And I sort of fell in love with it because I heard my father playing it when I was younger, and I came into it later in life. If I could share an anecdote about this particular instrument and how it really resonates with me, and how I'm hoping to sort of bring it into this project, because I do feel that Western music has played sort of an important role in all this. My father in the late 70s went to Nashville and to learn how to play this instrument. He took a 2-month course. It was like an intensive. He was really into a pedal steel player by the name of Ben Keith, and he played this very specific guitar called an Emmons, and it's called a push-pull pedal steel. That's the style of it. It has this very specific tonality to it. My father was really gung-ho on this idea that I need this guitar. It happened to be 1978. He wanted this black pedal steel, this black Emmons pedal steel. The guy that he took this intensive from sort of talked him out of it because of the undercarriage assembly being a little wonky, and sort of saying, hey, if you're touring a lot, you probably don't want this thing because it requires a lot of maintenance. My father always told me when I was younger, this is my only regret, not getting that thing. When I got into pedal steel, there was a gentleman in his 70s that was down in Oregon, but is now in Washington State. His name is Lynn Stafford. And he is a former engineer that turned into basically an Emmons tech. Like, he sort of builds and repairs and refurbishes these things. It started out as a retirement, but he got so good at it that he sort of pursued it as a second career. I befriended Lynn. I told him my story. He helped me get into sort of a starter pedal steel. And then as I was moving down to California, I went to visit him to say goodbye to him and kind of catch up and see his shop, because we both repair instruments, and he was going to give me a few trade sort of tasks to keep my pedal steel operational. I told him this whole story that I just told you about my father and going to Nashville, and he called me and said, hey, this is odd, but I have a 1978 black Emmons pedal steel in my shop right now. I happen to find one. And I was sort of like dumbfounded. I was like, what? How did that happen? And he was sort of like, would you sell your pedal steel to get this thing? And I was sort of like, well, yeah, I can't afford to have two of these things, and yeah, but I don't have any money. I'm about to move to Los Angeles. I can't afford that. And he was like, okay. And so I drove down to Oregon I was living in Seattle at the time. I drove down to Oregon, and on my way down, I stopped and got some coffee, and I got a call from just an unknown number. And this was a friend of Lynn's, and this friend said, hey, Lynn told me that you're gonna buy that Emmons, and that you have your pedal steel, so you could just leave it with Lynn, and when you buy this Emmons. And I was sort of like, no, I'm not gonna buy that. Like, I have no intention of buying this thing, and I can't afford it. Anyhow, I come down to this spot, we talk about some things, he shows me this guitar, and he sort of pulls me aside, and he said to me, listen, I really want you to have this guitar. Money is not a factor in this for me. I'm not concerned about it. You pay me when you have the money, when you have the funds. This was supposed to go to your father at one point, and I need this to go to you now. And that really, really struck me. It was an emotional moment, and so I was able to get that guitar, and that guitar has sort of become a large part of what I do musically, and it feels sort of like a lineage in certain ways. How I approach music, it's all based on this idea of vulnerability. I try to put myself into positions where I feel uncomfortable, because I think that in my mind, the idea of approaching art or pursuing music, that's an important thing, because it's sort of like saying, there's this really specific moment like I'm doing right now. I don't know any of you right now, but I think that there's a specific moment when it comes to presenting an idea, and if you are uncomfortable, you're showing these sides of yourself, and you're basically letting a window in. This is a huge part of what I'm trying to do musically. I guess what I'm trying to say about all this stuff, and I'm bringing these different ideas up, is that I want to sort of prep you for what I do, and what, if any of you are coming to the show tonight, to sort of be prepped for how I'm presenting these ideas, because in a lot of ways it's maybe a little bit more unconventional. It's not, I do play guitar, and I'm going to play guitar and sit and sing for you all, but in this particular situation, with me playing the pedal steel, I will play some parts and then basically stand up and sing a cappella. And the idea of movement is very important to me, and it's sort of, again, it's just all these things are exercises in vulnerability. I want to play you this song right now, and then I kind of want to open it up to questions, if that's okay with everybody. I was a simple robin when I started out to roam, headed for Montana when I left my happy home. And when I crossed the Rio Grande, I thought I'd done my best. Never counted on the bullshit that they peddled in the West. A mooshy-doo-doo, final dee-doo-doo, mooshy-doo-doo, the other way you toot-too. I settled in a little town the natives they call Butte. I looked about the diggings for a job I thought would suit. I finally got located, and I liked it mighty fine. I made a bunch of money, so I thought I'd buy a mine, a moosha-toot-toot. Final deedle-doo, moosha-toot-toot, the other way you toot-too-I. Now a bullshit foreman boss of this old mine told me $10,000 would make this thing look fine. I dished him out the money, and I thought I had a snap. When nothing but bullshit just dropped down in my lap, a moosh-a-toot-toot. Final deedle-doo, moosh-a-toot-toot, the other will you toot-toot-I. I got bullshit from the river, I got bullshit from the hill. I got so much damn bullshit that I couldn't pay my bills. They gave it to me red hot, and they gave it to me cold. And I got more bullshit than I got Montana gold. The moosh-a-toot-toot. Final deedle-doo, moosh-a-toot-toot, the other will you toot-toot-I. Final deedle-doo, moosh-a-toot-toot, the other will you toot-toot-I. Final deedle-doo. Are there any questions about anything? Did I sufficiently trip over enough words for everybody?
I have one question.
Yes.
It's probably not you to answer. Is that our Kevin Shannon? The only dad?
That's what I've been wondering. I don't think so. So this Kevin Shannon Folklife Survey?
Yeah.
The reason we're asking is that our former director, her father's name was Kevin Shannon. I don't think it's the same person.
I'm not sure. I mean, to be honest, this is like this person did live in Montana. They're sort of like a purveyor of like they were like a storyteller, and like basically like had amassed all these old protest songs from the mining camp. And
Do you know how old he was about when you,
I'm like, it's like, well, ours kind of did that too, but on an aside.
He was a great storyteller.
Yeah.
May I look for a photo of him and show it to you? Is that okay?
Yeah.
So that we can figure out, we
Yeah,
can get down to brass tacks
He
here.
was my uncle's best friend.
Yeah, that's what I've been thinking the whole time, going, that can't be our Kevin Shannon.
Yeah. Our Kevin Shannon.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't this amazing that I can just look this up?
I know. Yeah, I know, it is.
Yeah, I'm just really curious.
In the meantime,
Because Ellen should be here if that's the case.
yeah.
I have a feeling it's not, but
I kind of do too.
at the same time, it's like, well, it could be.
Do we have any other questions in the meantime? Yeah.
I just like